So delighted to have Patric Verrone here. It's funny because we put out a call for people to contribute demos and papers to this conference, and it ended up getting Cory Doctorow was nice enough to post it on Boing Boing, and so we got about more than 50 papers were submitted, to which we had to actually narrow it down to just a handful. And just through the ordinary process, we get this email from Patric, and the email is just like, yeah, I co-produced this show. It was about robots a little bit. It's called Futurama. Anyway, I was going to come and talk about robotics in the context and law in the context of my show, Futurama. And everybody on the program committee, it was funny because we were all on the call, and so we didn't even talk about it until the very end, and then we're like, oh yeah, and then we're going to have the Futurama person, and then everybody started talking about how cool that was. That this is so we're really, really delighted to have Patric here with us today, who obviously is one of the co-producers of the show, and we're really happy to have gotten on your radar and for you to be able to do this. And so today is basically a presentation about some of the interesting legal and policy themes that you see in the show, which of course features very prominently a robot, or one or more, but at least one robot bender as a central character. So please join me in welcoming Patric here for this last session. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate that it was as welcome an idea, considering I submitted it, and the deadline by which we were supposed to hear back came and went, and then a week later I got the email saying, "Oh, you're in." So that's a way to do it. Look, that's a deadline that I respect. I also want to mention that while we were having lunch, one of the individuals at the table where I was eating said, "Well, you got the 4 o'clock slot," which of course made me feel like I was important, when in fact she meant it as that's the one right before it's over. And it reminded me, I started my career, I'm a television writer by trade. I was trained as a lawyer, and I threw that career away. But I started in the business working for Johnny Carson when he was at The Tonight Show, and the biggest audience reaction he would always get would be during Karnak. For those of you who are too young, it was the old Answer Man bit, and then when he did Karnak, and Ed McMahon would hold up the last, he had the last envelope, and it would get a big response from the audience, and everyone would be really, and Johnny would look indignant. So I'm pleased to tell you that I am the last speaker of the day. There you are. See, it's still, the call and response still works. I can also tell you that you should be really glad to see me, because as I've been sitting here all day, watching all the other fantastic, fascinating panels, cogitating all these really sophisticated ideas about the future of robotics and the law, I'm sitting there like a backseat driver in a driverless car, because I know all the answers. I am privy to all of the information you seek as a writer-producer on all 140 episodes of Futurama, or as we like to call it, Matt Groening's other show. And we spend a lot of time when we produce this show thinking about the future, and thinking about the status of robots and the status of robotics and the laws applicable to them as they portend to exist in the year 3000. So I can tell you how it's all going to turn out 1,000 years from now. I don't know how it's going to get there, and I don't know what's going to happen between now and then. I can also tell you that there's going to be a robo-apocalypse in the year 3021. Hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Having worked on every episode, I also feel, though, obligated to let those of you who are here and who've been on the previous panels and who had these, everyone has marvelous degrees and credentials, and I do want to point out that I cannot take responsibility for all of the success of Futurama, in fact, I can take credit for very little of the science that's in Futurama. We have a multi-Emmy award-winning writing staff that also includes individuals with 3 doctorates in applied math, organic chemistry, and computer science. We have 8 master's degrees from all over the U.S. We have 50 years of Harvard education. That does not include Al Gore, who has appeared as a voice, and we even have one guy who didn't apply to Harvard and got his degree from Stanford. We have 2 writers on the staff with Erdos numbers of 4 and 3, for those of you who appreciate how important that is. The gentleman on the left, Jeff Westbrook, Dr. Westbrook, also has a Bacon number of 3. So he has a combined Erdos-Bacon number, which is, I think, the lowest in show business. The other gentleman on the right, Ken Keeler, devised a theorem which we believe is the first published theorem or proven theorem that ever to appear on a holographic blackboard in a cartoon. If you look it up online, it is called the Keeler theorem, and it appeared in the episode Prisoner of Benda. What this tells you, or what it should tell you, is that we were the most overeducated writing staff in the history of animation, and yet it did not keep us from getting the show canceled 3 times. One thing we couldn't figure out was how to keep it on the air. So for the uninformed, as opposed to the disinterested, who I assume have already left, Futurama is an animated cartoon show set 1,000 years in the future. It centers around a disenchanted 20-something delivery boy named Philip J. Fry, who was accidentally cryogenically frozen on New Year's Eve 1999. He wakes up in New York in the year 2999, where he's befriended by a beautiful cyclops named Leela, a foul-mouthed bending unit robot named Bender, and goes to work for his great, to the nth degree, grand nephew, almost called him Philo Farnsworth. He's named after Philo Farnsworth, Hubert Farnsworth, who's a roboticist and mad scientist type, and they have this intergalactic delivery company called Planet Express, and the comedy hijinks ensue. But the world in which, this future world in which Futurama takes place is filled with boundless technologies, alien races, most of whom like to watch television, the preserved, disembodied heads of countless politicians and celebrities, which was designed so that if we got a celebrity to appear, they could appear as their own head in a jar. An underground world of past history and mutants, and of course robots. Robots of all shapes and sizes and tasks, robots that work for and with and sometimes over humans, robot criminals, robot judges. We have a preacher bot and a hedonism bot. We have mechanical ghosts and mechanical gods, robot slaves and the robot Lincoln who freed them, stripper bots and abots, mechano-revolutionaries and evolutionaries, 30th Century Fox, a 40% Iron Chef, and an actual factual robot hell. And being the nerd types that we are, we regularly spent time debating social and ethical and legal and emotional ramifications of what it was like to be a robot, since that's what people thought we were in college. Interestingly, our fascination, thank you for laughing at what you think we thought we were. The writers, our fascination with robots wasn't limited to the show itself. We actually had 2 different 3D printers in the office, one of which we built from a kit, proving that Ken Keeler's PhD from Harvard in electrical engineering did not go to waste. He was able to build that. And a second one that they sent to us, it's the only swag I've ever gotten in 25 years in the entertainment industry. We did an episode about a 3D printer, and MakerBot sent us a 3D printer. It was extraordinary. So we wanted to do an episode about a Ferrari, but it didn't happen. We also had an Arduino-based calendar that served to, it's hard to see, but it also told the time, and we put on little Jumbotron shows with it. It's got, as I say, the Arduino is off screen, but it had about 300 LEDs there. And unlike most calendars, where you have to know the date and the piece of paper merely confirms it, this one told you the date. We also had a thermostat in the room, which there was a real argument as to whether or not the thermostat was a robot. And the writer arguing on behalf of it being, not being a robot said, well, it can't be a robot, it doesn't have a face, to which the other writer went up and drew a face on the thermostat, and that settled the discussion. So whereas my involvement, because of everybody else had science and math backgrounds, I had my humble little JD, and so it would always come to me whenever we had a courtroom scene or a legal issue. Infrequently, they would even have to appear before the learned heads of the Earth Supreme Court, and they would always come to me for advice, which of course was ultimately ignored. The most annoying part of it, look, they put Clarence Thomas's head in the position where John Paul Stevens's head should have been, and I'm telling you, I told the animators there's an order here. Sure, you can put in Abe Vigoda as a joke if you want, but the fact is you have to give O'Connor more tenure than Scalia, and they simply didn't pay attention to me. So let me talk now, because this is why I make the big bucks here, talking about what the legal ramifications and considerations for robots in the year 3000. First, let me talk about robot and human interaction. So in this future world, robots live among us, they walk among us, they have certain rights, but they are also forbidden from doing certain things. They're not allowed by practice to play Blernsball, which was a baseball kind of game that we invented. And the reason was they'd just be too good. So robots were forbidden as a practical matter from playing Blernsball. From a legal perspective, they were prohibited from marrying humans until the episode where Proposition Infinity was passed, so that they now can. And in some respects, they're forbidden by their actual programming. I was discussing with a gentleman earlier that the 3 laws of robotics are actually built into many of the robots, and some of them just choose to ignore them, or at least make it look like they're ignoring them. Mankind designed these robots in the future, although they were designed, it sounds like the beginning of Battlestar Galactica, they were designed to reproduce themselves. So robots in the future can have their own children. Some harbor secret resentment against humankind. They may one day rebel. I don't want to give away an episode that hasn't aired yet. Some have even broken off to form their own civilizations, where they clearly have that old blue-red style of 3D, as opposed to the polarized version that we think is so sophisticated. In deference to Professor Frumkin's discussion about 3 types of robots, we too at Futurama had 3 types of robots. The first type I would categorize as robots that perform what we in the 21st century think of as machine functions. Bender bends things. He does what a machine does. There's a robot named Fender who does what a speaker does. This was Bev, who is a soda machine. There's a wide variety of them, from an alarm clock. The ship itself was a robot. Wash bucket. This guy here was named Lifter. He was a forklift. The keg robot. And on the far right there, that's Professor Fisher-Price Spiekenspel, who proved that the cow says moo and has got tenure for that 50 years before and has been riding on it ever since. And then the always good for a laugh hot coffee enema robot. The second class or category of robots are the robots that perform what we would consider human functions. This is a robot by the name of Earl. who is obviously a police officer. He performs the functions of a police officer. This should obviously be of interest to the professors from West Point. He has to work, though, with a human partner who is, of course, 2 weeks from retirement. And whenever he's off duty, he wears a Kangol hat because every aspect of his life is made to look like Samuel L. Jackson. Here is a human bartender named Isaac. We had a robot bartender. This is Malfunctioning Eddie, who is the car sales manager. His prices genuinely are insane. Billionaire Bot, who is programmed. This is one of my favorites. Billionaire Bot, by profession, he's a professional wrestler. And yet, he somehow, whatever, he was programmed to be really, really wealthy. And so he's constantly loaded with money. We have, this is the unfortunate Tinny Tim, who is a crippled robot orphan. There's Calculon, Monique, all the acting robots programmed to act and appear on the soap opera All My Circuits. This is the robot mafia, the entire robot mafia. We'll discuss them in some detail later. The 3 robot farmer daughters, including the exotic Crushinator on the far right. Here are the 3 robot frat brothers in Epsilon Rho Rho. And self-evident robot, the human replacements like HumorBot 5.0, Executor, Blatherbot, Animatronio, and the NannyBot 1.0, which had some design defects, but what are you going to do? And then the third category, and this is the one that's a little bit sophisticated even for us. It's the robots that exist purely for the purpose of a robot society function, including, as I described earlier, the preacher bot and the hedonism bot. Some of them have sort of productive functions. This is Dr. Perceptron, who is from the HAL home for the criminally insane robots. Some are destructive. This is the robot devil. And then there's some that are absolutely inexplicable. This is the first robot able to qualify for a boat loan. That's all he was. He did, in real life, somebody named a band after him. So there's a band out there called the first robot ever to qualify for a boat loan. That's the robot world. The status of the legal system circa 3000 is very, very similar to what we have today. There are civil courts, there are criminal courts. Because it's television, almost any time you get into court, it's for a trial of some variety. Most of the judges are human. There are robot judges. There is an appeals court system. As I said, the government of the earth in 3000 is unified, and the president of Earth is the head of Richard Nixon, who's carried around by the headless body of the clone of the headless body of Agnew, because we killed off Agnew earlier. But and which is another reason. I mean, I got to assume I pitched this, nobody bought it. That at some point he would try to appoint the head of Homer Thornberry to the Supreme Court, and it didn't happen for him. Even then, he couldn't get Thornberry on the court. This is the outside of the courtroom. And so generally speaking, robots in the legal system, again, it works similarly to the way we have now. In that humans generally judge robots. There are other places where robot judges are in place. The places where robots have gone off and set up their own society, obviously they are the ones who stand in judgment on other robots, although we'll talk about a couple of examples where they've actually stood in judgment of humans. There's also this moral code that exists among robots that's extrajudicial, that has to do with the Church of Robotology, and it's more cultish than anything else, and it ultimately involves the robot devil. But that's a separate. It's separate from the societal system. So the fundamental goal, in my mind at least, of how robots are judged and prosecuted. This, by the way, is not from the show, but I thought it was a neat picture to put up there. I hope no one sues me for infringement, but there's so many things being infringed there that you got a Disney, you got Doctor Who. The fundamental, at least to me, the three fundamental characteristics of a judicial system that works, threefold. The first is you need to have proper jurisdiction, due process. You need to have the right parties who are being adjudicated. Secondly, you need to have a consistent and appropriate penalty or remedy. And third, you need to have impartial adjudicators, whether it be judge, mediator, jury, umpire, etc. And to jump ahead, the most important robot in the Futurama universe is Bender. This is a picture that he provided, so he's not really known for being a magician, but at least it's a slightly different pose for him. He runs on alcohol. He smokes cigars. He used to claim that he smoked cigars because he needed the exhaust fumes, but in fact today he just admits that it's because it makes him look cool. He has a very distinct streak of amoral, antisocial behavior, which typically manifests itself with petty theft, but he claims he's committed many human murders. One of his catchphrases is "kill all humans." I believe, and we were discussing this earlier, his bark is much worse than his bite, and that in fact he does have the Asimov rules about not hurting humans. His other catchphrase is "bite my shiny metal ass." Here he is seen hoisted by his own petard, having had his ass stolen and unable to require anyone to bite it. The first appearance of a courtroom on Futurama was in the second season. We had a court-martial involving Zapp Brannigan at the end of the first season, but the first one that involved robots was in an episode called "Put Your Head on My Shoulder," and I'll show you it was a very quick appearance, and it goes something like this.
You mean people will pay good money for romance? I think I have a scheme so deviously clever that
$500 and time served.
Stupid anti-pimping laws. Well, pay the man.
Bender, honey, we love you.
Shut up, baby, I know it.
So what do we learn from that very short clip? Clearly Bender, first of all, the trappings are very, very recognizable to us. More recognizable than to some of you, I'm sure. But the idea that it's a judge on a bench, and I believe, obviously he's found guilty for pimping. We assume these female robots are robot hookers. And the character of Leela, who only appeared briefly, is being ordered to pay the man. So even though Bender is the adjudicated party, even though he's the individual who's being accused, he insists that Leela, who doesn't either own him or have any relationship with him other than she's a co-worker, she's required to either post bail or pay the fine, whatever's going on there. But clearly, I think the three elements that we discussed are there. He's the accused party, the penalty is a fine, and there's a human judge adjudicator. Bender, the robot, violated a law. He was required to financially compensate human society. And interestingly, even though he doesn't like the law, he never does it again. So the process seems to have worked. He does other things, but he never does that again. There are some other lingering questions with this clip, though. The first is, do we know if the robot hookers were charged with solicitation? We do not. Is that gold tooth, is that actual gold, or is it just pixels? And then also, does Leela ultimately pay the fine? I don't know the answers to any of those questions. I'm going to move now to a different system for showing videos because I overloaded my PowerPoint. And I want to introduce two other characters who will appear in these other clips, and so you learn a little bit more about the courtroom or the court system. One is a judge who appears frequently named Judge Whitey. He's named Judge Whitey, and he's a very elite and aloof, middle-aged white guy because we wanted to resist the temptation that exists in television to make every judge a woman or person of color. So we went completely the other way and made him look like this, this old white guy. He is very aloof, elitist, racially, ethnically, and gender biased, and he is the most politically incorrect judge probably on TV. Here he is ruling on a motion for injunctive relief to stop a robot fox hunt.
The robot fox has been declared an endangered robo-species. This injunction suspends all robot fox hunting for 24 hours while our motion is under consideration.
We'll see you in court.
Motion destroyed. The hunt shall resume at sunup. He's crooked, but fair.
Interestingly, I think Dr. Zoidberg, the lobster character there, is wrong in that I think he's, I don't know that he's fair, but he's certainly, I don't know that he's, I don't think that he's influenced necessarily by something other than elitism or prejudice. It's in this case, self-interest, but he's got, as we'll see later, he's got other priorities that seem to take, to influence the way he decides things. The other character that we see a fair amount is the attorney who often, he goes from being prosecutor to defense. This is where I'm telling you, these guys, these science guys didn't listen to me. I said, you get one guy who's a prosecutor, you got different lawyers who are defense lawyers, and they don't cross. No, we'll make it this one lawyer. And we wanted to do something along the lines of the Matlock, Jimmy Stewart and Anatomy of a Murder. We want to be a small town, especially since it was supposed to be futuristic and sophisticated. And then we also decided, because it's a cartoon, to make him a hyper-intelligent chicken.
Oh, son, as your lawyer, I declare y'all are in a 12-piece bucket of trouble. But I done struck you a deal. 5 hours of community service, cleaning up that old mess you caused.
5 hours? Oh, man, couldn't you just got me the death penalty?
I'd have done better, but it's plumb hard pleading a case while awaiting trial for that incompetence.
Yeah, good luck with that.
What Bender had done, Bender was in charge of a dark matter ship that ran aground outside of Pluto, and there was this spill, and it got dark matter all over some space penguins, and as a result, and what's interesting here is that he's defended by this hyper chicken lawyer, and the penalty seems to be light, but at least it's meant to be to compensate society for what he did. He's got to do 5 hours of community service cleaning up penguins. Alternatively, the lawyer, obviously for a joke, is the one in jail, and because he's been accused of incompetence, he's been jailed, which seems like more of an extreme, unless, of course, they consider him a flight risk. Thank you very much. That's right. You come up and do this. All right. Big buck. Not today. So the next clip deals with what I would call an important threshold question regarding the prosecution of robots and their liability. It's in the case of New York v. Santa, and it involves Robot Santa. Now, the history is a little complicated. The robot Santa was built, I think, in the 28th century, and he was designed to make up for the death of the real Santa, who evidently died at that point. And Robot Santa was built to do mechanically what this human guy had done for generations. But there's a malfunction, and so rather than having a naughty and nice list, and again, the gentleman from West Point will appreciate this, his standards, his programming became too rigid, and everybody is determined to be naughty. And so Santa on Christmas Eve, rather than delivering gifts, pretty much delivers mayhem. And instead of mistletoe, he's got tow missiles, and it's a big mess. And it's actually one of the few episodes where we were told we could only air it after 10 o'clock because it has some elements of violence in it. Anyway, so his second appearance, Robot Santa was captured, and they sent Bender in to do what Santa used to do. And the idea was that he would be what Santa used to be. But the problem was most people on Earth were expecting the malicious robot Santa, so Bender ends up getting prosecuted for the crime of being Santa. And here's...
This Xmas Day session of court will come to order. The Honorable Judge Whitey presiding.
Santa Claus, you stand accused of crimes against humanity. How do you plead?
Not Santa!
There he is again!
Now, Pramela, I know it's scary in that there witness box, but tain't no need to fear me. I'm sorry, I thought you was corn. Now, would you please point at that robot over there? No further questions. Daddy done good, huh?
Isn't it true that you have been paid for your testimony?
Yes, you gave me $1 and some candy.
And yet you haven't said what I told you to say. How can any of us trust you?
Quit badgering the witness.
Badger? Where?
Whereas I have a ham dinner with mayonnaise waiting for me at my mansion, I find the defendant guilty. Santa Claus, I hereby sentence you to be executed at sundown.
Oh!
It's not fair. I just hope that dumb chicken is ashamed of himself.
So once again, the assessment of Leela is that it's not fair. When in fact, I mean, the fact that he was, first of all, look at the speediness of that trial. The very night that he was accused of the crime, the very night that it allegedly took place, he's in court. So it certainly brings new meaning to the idea of a speedy trial. He's also, I mean, there is a fair amount of due process there. The case is about whether or not he is Santa. It's decided kind of badly, but it is it didn't help him that he was wearing a Santa outfit at the time. But the penalty is execution. So here we have the solution to a robot crime being shut the robot off, stop the robot, something that I think is an important precedent that should be considered as we design laws for what kind of punishments robots should be. I'll get to the execution later. I do want to show one of the more complicated cases, and it involved a bank robbery, which both Bender and Fry are accused of the bank robbery. We've seen clearly they were not involved. They're being framed by a psychopath, a robot who is programmed to be a psychopath named Roberto, and it goes something like this.
Court is in session. The Honorable Judge Whitey presiding.
The charge is bank robbery. Now, my caddy chauffeur informs me that a bank is a place where people put money that isn't properly invested. Therefore, robbing a bank is tantamount to that most heinous of crimes, theft of money.
As the surveillance camera for that bank what all the judge was a-jawing about, could y'all tell us what you done seen the day of the crime?
Well, let's see. My memory's a little fuzzy, but it went exactly like this.
Your Honor, I move that I be disbarred for introducing this evidence against my own clients. Mr. Fry, do you recognize the robot a-hugging on you in this here hologram?
I sure do. That's the real robber, and I'll never forget his name as long as I live. And that name is...
Fry, just give a name. You don't want to look stupid on court TV.
You're right. It was...
Yes? What? You say if I testify, I'll be killed? Oh, it's for you.
And the other hamburger will also be made of your lungs. So long, pal.
I refuse to testify on the grounds that my organs will be chopped up into a patty.
Ah, the 67th Amendment.
I may be a simple country hyper chicken, but I know when we're finger-licked. What do you say we plead insanity?
A few months in an insane asylum? I could do that standing on my head.
If you start now, it might help our case.
Counselor, what evidence do you offer to support this new plea of insanity?
Well, for one, they done hired me to represent them.
Insanity plea is accepted.
Okay, so we learned a number of things from this particular clip. One is that robots are, for whatever function they perform in the court system, they're really good witnesses because they have an actual recordation, even though their memory might be fuzzy. They can replay what happened. We also know that even though Judge Whitey, he can enumerate the 40 at least additional constitutional amendments that have occurred in the last 1,000 years, he's still pretty much a bad judge because he takes cell phone calls on the bench. There's also the whole idea that a robot can plead insanity. Whatever practical meaning that has is actually called into question a little bit later in the episode when both Bender and Fry are sent to the robot asylum. Judge Whitey decides that there's overcrowding in the human jail because he declared poverty a crime, so everybody who's poor is in the human jail, and so he sends Fry to the insane asylum, the robot insane asylum, where there are robots who were programmed to be insane and are in there, in addition to robots who eventually Roberto, the actual criminal, is sent there because he went back and committed the crime. He went back and robbed the bank again, gets sent to the asylum. That's considered crazy even by robot psychopath standards. Once again, though, the remedy is clearly rehabilitative. We assume they got the money back because they were caught at the time. Nobody got away with it, but it's a rehabilitative memory. The next case involves a term of service violation where, in fact, a human is accused of overclocking a robot. And let me play that clip.
Your Honor, Mom is a poor, frail industrialist with 3 special sons who require constant neglect. Yet, isn't it true, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that this boy, this Hubert Farnsworth...
That's my name. Don't wear it out.
...deliberately robbed her blind by improving his own robot?
It's true. He did it.
No further questions for this jury. Before I call a recess for mimosas and horse breeding, can the defense produce the bending unit in question?
We don't know where the hell he is.
Your Honor, that is something we cannot do.
Then I'm holding the defendants in contempt and fining them $10,000 a day until they produce the robot.
Oh, at that rate, Planet Express will be bankrupt in 4 fingers!
I don't know if you noticed there's a robot on the jury, that's a big development. There was also a robot prosecutor. Things are clearly moving to a more egalitarian state. There's another clip I'll show you later from that episode, but robots are becoming not only the victims or the accused in the system, they're also part of the prosecution. There's an early episode that takes place on the planet Chapek 9, which those of you who can think really fast recognize the name Chapek as being Carol Chapek, who coined the word robot in his play Rostrom's Universal Robot. Chopek 9 is an all-robot planet. The crew goes there to deliver something. They get arrested. The crime is being humans. They are prosecuted by a robot.
Your Honor, I intend to demonstrate beyond 0.5% of a doubt that these humans before us are guilty of the crime of being humans. Come to think of it, I rest my case.
Thank you, prosecutor. I will now consider the evidence.
Hey, wait a minute. Isn't anyone going to defend us?
Yeah. I mean, he may not have a case, but I'm genuinely not a human.
Quiet, human!
Uh-oh. He froze up again.
Try Control-Alt-Delete. Jiggle the cord.
Turn him off and on.
Clean the gook out of the mouse. Call technical support.
Okay, he's back online.
I find the defendants guilty.
Yay!
No!
Look, one eye. Count them. One, not human.
The humans are hereby sentenced to live as robots live on Earth. They will perform tedious calculations and spot-weld automobiles until they become obsolete and are given away to an inner-city middle school.
Hooray! Great work, Bender. You've taught us to hate humans all over again.
So clearly there the remedy is sort of a cosmic remuneration. They're to do the menial tasks that we seemingly make robots and computers do. That episode takes a little twist when instead of that punishment, however, they're sent before, this turns out to have been a show trial, and they go before these other robot elders who want them to have Bender, who's holding himself out, as I said earlier, as a guy who really hates humans, and then he can't do it. He can't kill his friends because I think ultimately his programming won't allow it. The other robot trial occurs on a planet where Professor Farnsworth, in an effort to prove evolution, sets up a robot society and gets accused of crimes against science. I think
Order! In the matter of Everyone v. Farnsworth, the alleged creationist faces a sentence of death by melting. Who is representing the accused?
I am, Your Honor.
Bender, what the hell are you doing?
Shut up. I'm billing you by the hour. Besides, I'm a robot. Don't listen to me. Ahem. Ladytrons and gentlebots.
Objection. In the absence of pants, defensive suspenders serve no purpose.
I'm going to allow them, for now.
Thank you. Your Honor, this meat man does not deny that we robots are the glorious product of evolution. He claims only to have played a small role in supplying the initial machinery. I ask you, is that so crazy? Yes, it's completely crazy. And that is why you must find him not guilty by reason of insanity.
Objection! I'm not crazy. I created you all, and I came here in a homemade spaceship and lived in a cave. If you don't believe me, ask my uncle.
Prosecutor, your opening statement.
Yeah, honey, I'll be home for dinner. The prosecution rests, Your Honor.
Very well. We will reconvene when the jury reaches a verdict.
Son, you in a whole mess of trouble. What?
Has the jury reached a verdict?
No, we have not. For we have evolved to a higher state of consciousness. In the grand scheme, all physical beings are but yokels. Now, settle your petty squabbles and get the hell out.
That'll be $10,000.
Both robot cases, clearly the prosecution, they're really cocky, these robot prosecutors. They simply say, oh, that's, they simply put the fact is you're here, therefore you're guilty. And they don't need to make much of an argument after that. It's also interesting that they do evolve as quickly as they do. Let me, in the interest of time, jump ahead to the other great defense that Bender comes up with. I think it's this. Insanity is one thing, but then Bender has another idea here. Nope, that's not it. Hold on. It's this one. Sorry.
Bender Rodriguez, you are charged with petty larceny, possession of something analogous to drugs, and assault with a smelly weapon. How do you plead?
Not guilty! Although I did do it. That's right, I'm bad.
Due to the overwhelming nature of the evidence, we will begin with closing statements.
Your Honor, the state's case contains not one Kentucky kernel of truth, resting as it does on the contention that my client made a series of bad decisions. However, my client made no such decisions.
But by your client's own admission.
You see, Bender here is what is known in scientific circles as a robot. A mere automaton whose behavior is pre-programmed by his software. He has no free will. He cannot decide to engage in criminal behavior. How, I say, how can you convict him for his actions when he lacks the free will to undertake those actions?
I'm awake! I'm awake!
Order! Counselor, I am a robot myself. Are you suggesting that any verdict I reach is simply the output of a pre-programmed...
Computation complete.
Not guilty!
Yeah! You did it, Bender. You got away with things.
Did I, Fry? Did I? What's the point of living if I don't have free will? From now on, no matter what cool crimes I commit, people will say, Bender didn't do that. It was just Bender's programming. Well, I committed these crimes. Do you hear me? I'm guilty!
Bailiffs, get that innocent robot out of my courtroom!
Guilty!
So you see, it's all about the programming when it comes to mens rea and you know, deterministic guilt. The final clip I want to show you is the resolution. You remember the Santa case. He was found guilty and was going to be executed. The executioner in the future, it turns out to be the mayor of New York, who has the somewhat undignified name of Mayor Puppenmeyer. This happens to be his name.
Ah, good old Maggie. When I pull the switch, these powerful electromagnets will tear you limb from limb, killing you in the most humane possible manner.
But, Mr. Mayor, that doesn't sound humane!
It is for the witnesses, because it's not boring. The instant this random number generator reaches 0, you'll be executed.
Oh.
10, 3, 12, 3 again.
Stop the execution!
Leela!
15, -8.
You've got the wrong Santa, and I'll prove it.
I'm Santa Claus.
What? 27.
No, I'm Santa Claus.
6.
We're also Santa Claus.
And I'm his friend Jesus.
Your Mayorness, if you execute him, you have to execute all of us.
You people aren't Santa. You're not even robots. 91. How dare you lie in front of Jesus? Hey, 0.
No! Not the magnet! Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home! Swing low!
This is horrible, but it's not boring.
Ho, ho, ho!
My God, the real Santa! Get him, Jesus!
I help those who help themselves.
So you can see why they made us show that one at 10 o'clock. There's an underlying premise that I think runs through a lot of our legal decision-making, or a lot of our comedy decision-making, is that whatever the outcome, plot-wise or joke-wise at any given moment, was, you know, whether or not it actually makes sense within the inherent psychology and emotional tracking of the show, the idea was to make sure that it's not boring. And that's the system of laws that develops in a robot world in the year 3000. And I don't know that that's necessarily what everyone here should be thinking about. I think in life it's the thing you should be thinking, making sure that it's not boring, but maybe it's limited to the, and better served in an animated cartoon, but that's the way we do things. I'll entertain questions and spec scripts. No? Good. Oh, Ryan.
People have questions?
Whoops.
Tough act to follow, right? I mean, so, yeah.
Sorry.
So I just want to say that I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
We can actually see the reception set up out there and such. So we'll head out there in just a minute. Thank you so much for doing this again. You know, so this is, I don't know, I didn't even make the connection that you're trained as a lawyer as well, and that's
I'm not famous as a lawyer.
Trained, yeah, but exactly, but they're lucky to have had you on the team.
Sure.
So I just want to point out that in the vein of talking about jurisprudence and theory, right? Which has been sort of hasn't come up quite as much in this conference in a lot of ways because we've been talking about the practical realities and such like. So, you know, if it turns out that the law is essentially indeterminate, right? That for every possible legal principle that you might have, that there's a counter principle and you can just draw from whichever one you want, right? Maybe entertainment will be the thing that actually drives. Will actually be the thing that drives. So there's that. So I think that what you're making an affirmative case here that entertainment is going to be the law and economics of the future, possibly. Right?
All I know from my own experience of 25 years in the entertainment business is that whenever I'm with lawyers, they all want to talk about show business, and whenever I'm with writers and people in show business, they all want free legal advice. So I have to make sure that both sides of my career are balanced in that regard. But no, I mean, it is some sociological analysis, and this came up in a couple of the earlier discussions, that you know, water finds its own level, and social norms tend to be developed based on what's acceptable, or at least what, you know, we see this in the marriage equality debate right now. I think it's a continuous spectrum that robots that we know to be what robots are, whether they be a thermostat or a calendar or a 3D printer, are not what robots will be in 10, 25, 100, 500 years. And I think the law will, by definition, evolve based on the function that those robots perform. And I think it was your paper from last year that said we need to develop analogous situations as much in real life as we do in comedy, because the two kooky things they tell you when you start in show business, when you start as a writer, they tell you nobody knows anything and write what you know. So, you know, try to make those two work. And I think that's, you know, there's a relatability that, man, that's what makes it justice. People feel like there's a justness to it.
Actually, the thing I found really fascinating about those clips was the speed of, you know, I mean, I'm sure partly for joke reasons and partly for entertainment reasons, but, you know, people are always complaining that episodes of something like The Good Wife, you know, a case that would take years is resolved in 45 minutes, and you have the thing going, you know, sort of 4 shots and you're through the case. And do you actually imagine that as you know, we were talking earlier about automated systems, and I wonder if actually law cases will become faster or whether they'll become more protracted as everybody argues about which audit log takes precedence over which one.
If Horn and Hardart still existed, I think they would. I mean, they made robots. They made this was the Horn and Hardart was the company that made the automat largely in New York, and the key was speed. And this goes back to the earliest days of The Simpsons, when, because of the static nature of animation, in that the more frames you put in there and the more movement, the more you have to get people in South Korea to draw. And so we needed to make sure, they needed to make sure in those days that the jokes were packed in as fast. And so plot-wise things, and our audience is now routinely, if you watch early Simpsons, if you watch any, the comedy before, even something that sort of seems frenetic like Get Smart, the pacing of those shows and those movies, even things like the Marx Brothers seems really slow and static. And so I think it's a function of the nature of society and our viewing habits that we like to see things. We imbibe a lot of things much faster. My parents can't watch this stuff because it just goes by too fast. I mean, the Simpsons also invented this concept called the freeze frame joke, which was, and you saw it if you saw them, every single establishing shot, the original famous Ray's courthouse. I mean, every establishing shot by its nature in The Simpsons and Family Guy, and they always will put some kind of joke that will often go by at 22 frames a second. And you really have to, and what it does is it allows for repeated viewing. In that case, it gives you something else to look for. But no, I think socially speaking, we're a much faster paced group of citizens, anxious to get outside and drink.
I'm going to risk the wrath of the audience with just one question, which is, you're describing here a lot of very powerful narratives that we've developed out of television and movies and sci-fi novels and all the rest that in some way really frame our sort of cultural sense of robots in the weapons area, Terminator and Skynet and all of these kinds of things. And I guess my question is, at any point do you think that the power of our cultural, pop culture framings winds up distorting or perhaps even holding back the ability to actually develop the technology in some real way? Are we too much in love with our sort of pop culture robots?
No, I actually think the opposite. And in the interest of expediency, I'll go on for a few minutes. I mean, Futurama can't take credit for inventing, I don't think, offhand, maybe in time, something that otherwise didn't exist, but Star Trek can. I mean, I remember there was a joke in law school where people would anytime somebody was asked a question they couldn't answer, they would reach into their back pocket and go, "Beam me up, Scotty." And that was, you had to use your wallet because there was no such thing as a flip phone, which dates me as to when I went to law school. But that technology, the technology of injection, whatever it's called, the spray injection, that first existed on Star Trek. I think they've done documentaries on how William Shatner changed the world, which is a little bit pompous, but it's William Shatner. And so, I mean, I do think, I think there is a back and forth between, and again, I can't say that I've had any actual involvement in seeing it happen, but I remember in the early days of The Simpsons, the first George Bush was president and made this speech in which he said America needs to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. And he caught a lot of hell for it, and he was not reelected as a result of that. Maybe there were other things, and so I mean, I think there is social interaction on a broader scale. I look at my own children who stare at me blankly when I talk about Johnny Carson, but he did, this is a guy who, we would type stuff in the morning, he would say it that night, and the next day it would be in the papers, or it would have, wouldn't necessarily have an immediate impact, but the claim was made in 1974 that when the worm turned against Nixon, it was when Johnny Carson turned against Nixon. And that's, that's the power of the media. I don't know if it's necessarily the power of anything I've been involved with. But I do think there are, the kids who watch this show, kids and adults who watch this show may go off someday and develop I mean, we've been told, as I said, there's bands called the first robot to get a boat loan. There were also roboticists who are naming their robots after characters on Futurama. So I actually think, in summary, that we have a positive impact on the future.
Okay, well, just a couple quick announcements, and then we'll please join me in thanking Patrick one more time. So, number one, if you want to sign up for a Birds of the Feather, basically, we put a bunch of names of restaurants that are not hard to get to, and a bunch of themes. And if you want to continue the conversation over dinner, I encourage you to go into the lobby here and sign up under the particular category if you're interested in doing that. And if not, we're going to hang out at the reception. I just wanted to thank everybody again. So our programming group has been doing a wonderful job. Our sponsors, AUVSI and Ropes and Gray and the Rock Center and Microsoft, and then just basically to invite you to join us for some drinks. So one last time, thank you so much, Patrick. This was really great.